and welcome to this new video. I'm your host Robin Bevan, and within this video we're going to talk about the sovereignty goddess, and I'm going to go deeper into, well, the sovereignty goddess, some various examples, and how this ties both into Jungian psychology, the equilibrium of the ecosystem, but also rites of passages when it comes to both men and women. The sovereignty goddess is a central figure in Indo-European myths, embodying balance and nurturing power within the natural world. The sovereignty goddess is then also deeply connected to the essence of the natural world: water, fertility, and the cycles of life. And in simpler terms, she is seen as a guardian who ensures that the land remains fertile and balanced, which in turn ensures the well-being of the people living on it. So imagine her as a divine caretaker of nature, making sure everything is in harmony and the land can support life, where she is also a protector of the marginalized and oppressed, where in mythology she often sides with the disenfranchised, representing their needs and demanding justice. One prominent example of the sovereignty goddess is the Morrigan, a powerful figure from Celtic mythology, and she is often associated with fate, battle, and sovereignty, embodying the primal forces of nature and transformation. And she is a guardian of the land's well-being and a symbol of the complex interplay between life and death, renewal and decay. And to understand her role, think of her as a deity who influences both the outcomes of conflicts and the natural cycles of renewal. So she oversees the balance between life and death, guiding the land's health and the fate of its people, similar to how a powerful queen might oversee and protect her kingdom. Freyja from Norse mythology is another embodiment of the sovereignty goddess as well, known for her connection to fertility, love, and war. And she similarly represents the nurturing aspects of the natural world as well as its more intense transformative forces, with a deep connection to both creation and destruction, where Freyja's association with fertility is central to her identity. As such, she is revered as a goddess of love and sexual attraction, which are closely linked to the fertility of the land and the prosperity of its people. And beyond her nurturing and fertility aspects, Freyja is also a fierce and transformative deity. She commands the Valkyries, warrior maidens who choose those who will die and those who will survive in battle. And this role not only underscores her connection to war and death, but also her involvement in guiding the souls of the deceased to the afterlife, as she has her own hall in Norse mythology. And by leading the Valkyries, Freyja facilitates the transition from life to the afterlife, embodying the cyclical nature of existence, including life, death, and rebirth. Where she also embodies the themes of reclaiming one's worth and challenging the status quo, where Freyja's transformative power is further exemplified by her association with the vulva, seeresses who practice prophecy and magic, and her ability to shapeshift and perform magic ties her to the deeper mystical elements of the Norse pantheon, and these aspects highlight her role in both influencing and navigating the forces of change and transformation within the natural world. And to make it clearer, think of her as a force who helps things grow and flourish, but also oversees the necessary changes and endings that allow new beginnings. Where Freyja also has a dual nature when it comes to love and loss as well, which within her coexist, helping to heal and make sense of losses and transformations. And she has thus also a deep emotional sensitivity and compassion, where another example of such a sovereignty goddess is Cybele, a goddess from Anatolian and later Greco-Roman traditions, which, like I said, further embodies the sovereignty goddess archetype. And she's often depicted as the Great Mother, associated with fertility, nature, and the protection of the natural world. And her rituals and myths emphasize her role in maintaining the balance of the ecosystem and ensuring the prosperity of both land and people. But really, in the deepest sense, the sovereignty goddess represents the land itself and its divine right to be nurtured and protected. She's often linked to the idea of sovereignty being tied to the health and fertility of the land, and her favor is essential for the prosperity and stability of the realm. And these goddesses, across different cultures and mythologies, share also common threads. They are not only symbols of fertility in nature, but also embody the deeper, more complex aspects of transformation and balance within both the natural world and the human psyche, if we take this from a Jungian lens. And in an even deeper sense, the sovereignty goddess helps balance the powerful and often chaotic energy represented by Wotan or Odin, if we take, for instance, Freyja here. And while Wotan is associated with wild, unpredictable forces like storms and wilderness, the sovereignty goddess provides stability and nurturing. And in practical terms, she acts like a counterbalance to Wotan's wild energy, ensuring that his powerful forces are channeled in a way that maintains harmony and order, much like a stabilizing force in a storm. So her role becomes crucial in guiding the Proto-Indo-European Koryos, or any hero figure, back into society. The Proto-Indo-European Koryos being linked to the various Indo-European warrior bands that lived on the edge of society. And by guiding these warrior bands and hero figures, she is ensuring that the transformative journey they go on aligns with the harmonious balance of the cosmic order. And in that way, the sovereignty goddess, often associated with nature, wolves, water, and fertility, holds the key to maintaining equilibrium. So she bestows, but also withholds, vitality and fertility to the land. Where in the context of the Wotan archetype and the Koryos pattern, she acts as a counterforce, preventing the unchecked and also potentially destructive aspects of Wotan from spiraling into chaos, keeping Wotan and his Koryos from becoming distorted and imbalanced, where the masculine energy can become patriarchal and a force of either rigid order or unbound primal chaos, where Wotan, as the archetype of the warrior, seeker of knowledge and bringer of both chaos and order, embodies the energies of leadership, sacrifice, and transformation. And integrating Wotan brings a fierce will to power, a readiness to challenge the status quo, and a deep connection to the darker aspects of the collective unconscious, if we would take this from a Jungian lens. Which also, needs to be balanced out by the sovereignty goddess to keep it from, getting either too rigid or going into just unbound primal chaos, like I said. But the power to both bestow and withhold that the sovereignty goddess wields also mirrors the dualistic nature of the unconscious as well, taking this from a Jungian lens. And it can be thus both nurturing and serpentine in nature. Finally, though, in the most archaic and fundamental sense, these feminine figures, and with it their possible precursor in mythology, represent a symbol of the ecosystem's equilibrium. And with that, they are guardians of balance and harmony, ensuring the well-being of their domains and playing essential roles in the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Where their influence then also extends to the vitality of the land, the prosperity of the people, and the preservation of the ecosystem. Where in myth, when the rulers are corrupt or negligent, the land becomes barren and the people suffer, as she symbolically withholds the vitality of the land. Yet another important part connected to such goddesses are the Koryos and Arkteia rituals with their linked animal totems such as wolves or bears, which link people to nature and instinct. Where for men, these goddesses represent an anima figure, and for women, she's connected to the archetype of the self. So her role in maintaining harmony and fertility can thus be seen as similar in nature to the self's function in integrating and harmonizing various aspects of the personality. This role is also extending to the social sphere as well, hence her connection to outcasts and the marginalized. And in that sense, the role of such a goddess figure and her connection to the equilibrium within the ecosystem, so ensuring the harmonious coexistence of all elements, aligns with the self's quest for balance. And this involves the integration of conflicting aspects of the psyche, such as the conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, shadow and light. And much like the goddess serves as a guardian of equilibrium and facilitates healing and restoration in the face of disruptions, the self is also associated with healing through the integration of repressed or neglected aspects, ultimately fostering a more balanced and healthy psyche. Where the goddess, often linked to nature and cycles, mirrors the natural rhythms within the ecosystem, where similarly, in Jungian terms, the self is connected to cyclical patterns reflecting the continual process of growth, transformation, and renewal in an individual psychological landscape. Furthermore, the goddess figure symbolizes the interconnected web of life in the ecosystem, emphasizing the essential role of each part for the well-being of the whole. Though in the end, the goddess, when it comes to rite of passage kind of rituals, is important for the liberation and well-being of men and women alike, as both the men of the Koryos and women of the Arkteia and similar rites throughout Indo-European cultures went to her for their healing, restoration, renewal, and liberation of the soul, where the sovereignty goddess and Wotan's partnership represents a balance between nurturing and dynamic, often chaotic forces. And while Wotan is associated with the wilderness and the unpredictable aspects of nature, the goddess complements and stabilizes these forces. Yet, there is something much deeper at play as well, a larger pattern that connects these masculine and feminine energies within the divine, especially regarding the rites of initiation. Where, for instance, with the Koryos, which refers to ancient warrior groups associated with initiation rites, well, these rites were crucial for a young man to transition into adulthood, which is also linked to such a sovereignty goddess as well, where activities such as hunting and training were also part of this process. So think of it like a rite of passage where young men undergo rigorous tests and challenges to prove their readiness for adulthood and their role in society, where wolves symbolize their connection to the wild and untamed aspects of nature, which they also had to face and symbolically integrate. And what they did in the wild included hunting, cattle raiding, martial or athletic training, dancing, feasting, and poetry. All of these activities taking place under the domain of Wotan or a similar figure in the wilderness. We can also see this with the Fianna, how they were not yet part of the Tuat, meaning assembly, who were the property-owning members of the tribe. The Fianna, similarly roaming the wilderness as unmarried males without possessions other than weapons, to protect the tribe, and through this initiation being prepared for manhood. This being echoed with the cult of Wolf Apollo as well, with members needing to go through initiations such as athletic competitions and other contests before being recognized as full members of the warrior community, where the link between Wolf Apollo and, really Apollo's name And such type of warriors, is very much visible in Apollo's name as well. Similarly, where, with the Fianna, they were not part of the Tuat, meaning assembly yet. Well, W. Burkert pointed out the name Apollo probably came from the Doric appella, meaning public assembly. This also being visible with Diana, Mars, and Quirinus all being linked to the public assembly, where Mars, linked to wolves, could be seen as the leader of the Koryos outside the city walls, with Quirinus being the peaceful Mars, associated with the tribe and the assembly of all Roman people, as much as Diana was too. But in a deeper sense, Quirinus and Mars are really one deity, Mars Quirinus, consisting of both a peaceful societal function and an active and dynamic warrior function linked to wild animals like wolves. And all of this, in that sense, is connected to bringing back in the youth of the tribe, but also later the warriors of the tribe, next to playing an important role for outcasts and scapegoats to reclaim their individuality and personal power. And there is with various such initiation rites such as the Herpes, Sali, Fianna, Arkteia, and the Corybantes, who are connected to Apollo but also Hecate originally, a consistent link to a goddess figure linked to sovereignty, warriors or hunters, and initiation, where Holda, Diana, Artemis, Athena, Leto, Hecate, the Morrigan, Feronia, and Juno hold the strongest connections to such qualities. Yet regarding the Koryos or Arkteia, there is more to this regarding these type of rituals, as they also served as important means of bonding, creating community, next to serving as rituals that connected us to nature, a sense of spiritual death and rebirth, and finally our primal and instinctual self. The sovereignty goddess then also played a key role in overseeing this process of rejuvenation and death and rebirth, guiding them through the process of going into the underworld and returning back from it, much how the anima plays such a role within the unconscious, as such a guiding figure. The anima, for instance, also plays an important role in the bringing together of the parts of the self that got scattered or repressed after we, through shadow work, faced and understood them. And this reintegration is something that she facilitates. And in the ancient sense, this included the reintegration into the community, so the whole, which included both the human and natural community, where the goddess figure also guided outcasts and scapegoats back into society, next to liberating and empowering them, bringing back their authentic self. And when it comes to such type of rites, well, where, for instance, Wotan and figures like Artemis oversee the rites in the wilderness, the goddess rules the social order, ruling with her husband, the thunder god, think Wotan, whose domain was the wilderness, when it came to the Koryos male rite of passage, for instance, where her daughter, in a proto-Indo-European sense, so a figure much like Artemis, oversaw something like the Arkteia female rite of passage, where both, upon return, would fall under the sovereignty goddess regarding societal reintegration. And Artemis, as daughter of the goddess, thus also showing the continuity of the divine oversight from mother to daughter. Where a figure like Dionysus, which was her son, also played a role regarding the mysteries of life and death. The Koryos, as much as the Corybantes that protected Zeus and Dionysus, are then also key when it comes to moving from the kingdom of Kronos to the kingdom of Zeus, from a state of duality and separation towards a deeper integration of the shadow, where then anima work further ties into the reintegration process, and with it also is connected to the sovereignty goddess, who in the end, together with her son Dionysus, helps to mend the two halves of the self, and with it take away the burden of the shadow, placed there through projections. Where with both the Koryos and Arkteia, these rites are about the protection and nurturing of the divine child, and with it the authentic self, reintegrating the primal, emotional, sensual, and sexual side of human nature, masculine and feminine. Now, when it comes to the Arkteia specifically, this rite was connected to a sacred grove with a temple dedicated to Artemis, with buildings in which the young girls and priestesses would stay in and upkeep. The ritual itself was done in the grove, often at dusk or even at night, with torches lighting up the sacred grove, with the flickering torchlight amidst the ancient sacred trees. The dance itself was made up of slow, solemn steps meant to imitate the movements of a bear and was performed to a tune from an aulos, so a double flute. The young girls would also then carry baskets of figs, wearing the krokotos, which was a saffron robe associated with girls taking part in the Browronian maturation rites. During the dance, the robe would shed, and that symbolized transition into womanhood, where the krokotos as a robe had since the more ancient Neolithic period replaced bear fur, and thus came to symbolize their connection to the bear. Essentially, by wearing and then shedding this robe, the girls symbolically moved from one stage of life to another, embracing their deeper instinctual selves. And by moving like bears, the Arktoi heightened their sense of identification with the animal, and thus the connection with the instinctual nature of the feminine, which touches upon much deeper layers of Artemis and her rites beyond the later patriarchal distortions tied to chastity and the pushing away of the primal and instinctual as being disruptive and to be feared. And the Koryos rituals were similarly deeply rooted in the wilderness, reflecting the primal and untamed aspects of nature and the human psyche. And these warriors were often dedicated to deities associated with the underworld, death, and rebirth, embodying the themes of transformation and renewal, with the wolf as a totemic animal representing the instinctual and primal aspects of the human psyche that the initiates were required to confront and integrate. And this process of integration was essential for their development into fully realized adults capable of contributing to their community. And my own practice drew heavily from the traditions of the Koryos, particularly in its focus on wilderness rites and the confrontation of the shadow, where of the past years I engaged in rituals dedicated to Zagreus, a deity of death, the underworld, and wilderness. So think Yimu in the Proto-Indo-European sense, and the sovereignty goddess. And these deities resonate also then with the core themes of the Koryos: death, rebirth, and the integration of primal energies. And the Proto-Indo-European Koryos were in their later various manifestations dedicated to both. And the Fianna served as a rite of passage into manhood, like I had said earlier, and also have parallels with similar young warrior bands in other early European cultures as well. And the actual Fianna warrior bands also have been connected to the Morrigan, who had been also connected to a ritual surrounding dog sacrifice known to be a Koryos ritual. And one such example of a link between them is found at the burned mound site known as the cooking pit of the Morrigan. And these sites are found in wild areas and are associated with the outsiders such as the Fianna, as well as with the hunting of deer, where another site was called the Two Breasts of the Morrigan, a pair of hills in Meath County, further being also suggested by scholars as a probable link between her and the Fianna as a sort of tutelary goddess, also known as a guardian deity. But in the end, how I wrote in the Substack article The Unseen Burden Grappling with the Scapegoat Complex, these rites are about cultivating assertiveness and reconnect us back to instincts, and with this overcome feelings of helplessness and cultivate the needed ego strength to challenge the inner critic. And at the same time, really dismantling the Freudian superego in the process, to create that inner space to nurture our inner child and with it the divine child within. our authentic self and true potential, so it can unfold and we can truly meaningfully contribute our gifts to society. And within this process, the accepting self, which for me was symbolized by Feronia, also plays a key role in the final stages of the process. And this part of the process falling under the domain of the sovereignty goddess, who merges back together the two halves of scapegoat and redeemer. Though Iachus, as the son of the goddess, can play such a role as well for people. And often, it actually tends to be a collaboration of both archetypes, which facilitates this process of moving beyond order and chaos, thus granting the liberation that the sovereignty goddess brings, and with it the full reintegration into the tribe as a free citizen.